In the small town of Hope Ridge, Arkansas, everyone knew Rex. He was the big, scarred German shepherd who lived in the fenced yard beside the old Braddock place. To most folks, he looked mean, thick chest, one torn ear, cloudy left eye. But to those who knew the truth, Rex wasn't dangerous. He was a veteran. A war dog who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan beside Sergeant Kyle Braddock. Rex had saved lives, sniffed out bombs, pulled injured soldiers from burning convoys, even once stood his ground against gunfire to protect a Marine unit. His body bore the marks of his loyalty. But now, his job was to rest. Kyle, who'd brought Rex home after retirement, kept to himself mostly. He spent most of his days repairing bikes and building things in his shed, with Rex never far from his side. But one person had never been afraid of Rex, not even for a second. Her name was Emily Monroe. She was 7, with tangled chestnut hair and scraped knees. She lived 2 doors down and passed Rex's yard every day on her walk home from school. At first, she just waved. Then she started bringing pieces of bologna wrapped in napkins. Rex would perk up when he saw her, tail thumping. Over time, the two developed a bond that no one had expected. Emily would sit cross-legged outside the fence and read stories aloud from picture books, stories about pirates, dragons, and brave heroes. She liked to imagine Rex was one of them. "He's not scary," she told her mother one night. "He's just tired." On weekends, Kyle would sometimes open the gate and let her sit on the porch with them. He didn't say much, but he smiled at how Rex leaned against her like a protective shadow. "She's the only kid he trusts," he told Emily's mom once. "The only one he's ever let near him without flinching." Emily didn't understand the depth of that statement. She just knew Rex was her best friend. But trouble came one sticky August afternoon. Emily was walking home alone, dragging her backpack, when she saw 3 boys in Kyle's yard. Teenagers, not from her school. They were climbing the fence, laughing. One had a can of spray paint. Another had something shiny, maybe a firecracker. Rex stood in the corner of the yard, growling low. Emily froze. "Hey!" she shouted, running toward the fence. "Get out of there." The boys turned. One of them laughed. "Look, it's the dog's little girlfriend. Leave him alone," Emily yelled. Her hands shook. But she didn't stop. She squeezed through the gate before they could shut it, placing herself between Rex and the boys. One of them, tall, with a black hoodie, stepped forward. "What are you gonna do, Pipsqueak?" Emily didn't back down. She spread her arms wide, shielding Rex. "He's a hero. You can't touch him." "Hero?" one boy mocked. "He's just a broken mutt." Then it happened. One threw a rock. It hit Emily in the shoulder. She yelped but didn't move. Another boy pushed her to the ground. Still, she crawled back up. Rex barked furiously, slamming against the kennel gate, unable to get to her. His growls were guttural, frantic. They struck her again, this time in the face. Emily staggered, blood dripping from her nose, and still she didn't run. Neighbors heard the commotion and began yelling. One man rushed over. The boys scrambled, leaping the fence and disappearing down the street. When Kyle returned minutes later, he found Emily collapsed in front of Rex's kennel, bruised and bloody, clutching the chain-link gate. Paramedics were already there. Emily barely opened her eyes. But when she did, she whispered one thing. "Please, don't let them hurt Rex." Kyle swallowed hard. His hands trembled as he gripped Rex's collar. That night, nothing else mattered. A 7-year-old girl had taken a beating to protect a war dog. And the world was about to find out. The emergency room at Hope Ridge General was quieter than usual that evening. The nurses moved quickly but gently, their faces drawn and eyes red. None of them had seen a child arrive in such a state over something so selfless. Emily Monroe, just 7 years old, had bruises on her ribs, a split lip, a swelling eye, and red abrasions along her arms and back. But she didn't cry. Not once. She kept asking the same thing. Is Rex okay? Dr. Harland leaned in and smiled softly. He's fine, sweetheart. He's safe. He's with Kyle. You saved him. Emily blinked slowly, trying to smile. Her voice was hoarse. Good. Meanwhile, in the waiting area, Kyle Braddock stood like a soldier at parade rest. He hadn't sat once. His jaw clenched, his fists tight at his sides, eyes locked on the double doors. Rex sat beside him on the tile floor, not making a sound. The German Shepherd had refused to leave the hospital entrance. Kyle had tried once to get him back into the truck. Rex had growled not at Kyle, but at the thought of leaving. The receptionist had simply whispered, "Let him stay." That girl saved him. Let him guard her now. Inside, Kyle's mind was a storm. He'd seen horrors in war zones, watched his men get hit by IEDs, heard last breaths echo through the desert. But he'd never felt this helpless. That little girl had stepped into harm's way without armor, without training, without hesitation. All for his dog. His best friend, his brother. I should have been there. Kyle muttered under his breath. Word spread fast through the small town. Parents wept. Veterans showed up to the hospital to offer help. The sheriff took a statement from Kyle and the neighbor who'd intervened, and soon the boys responsible were identified. 2 of them were local, barely 16. The third, the one with the firecracker, was already known to police. Charges were filed before midnight. Assault on a minor, trespassing, animal cruelty. But something else was happening, far beyond the two. Town, the neighbor who had recorded the entire attack, had posted the video to Facebook. It was shaky but clear. Emily screaming at the boys, taking hit after hit, shielding Rex like a soldier, shielding a fellow warrior. By sunrise, the clip had over 800,000 views. Veterans groups began sharing it. Animal rights activists reposted it with the caption, "This is what real courage looks like." Police K9 units commented, "She did what most adults wouldn't." Emily became a symbol not of pain, but of bravery, loyalty, and something that cut deeper than words. Love that didn't think twice. News vans showed up outside the hospital by 10 a.m. Reporters camped on sidewalks, hoping for a glimpse of the little girl who had stood like a soldier in a backyard battlefield. Inside her hospital room, Emily finally sat up, wincing but stubborn. Kyle came in holding Rex's leash. The moment Rex saw her, his whole body trembled with excitement, but he didn't jump. He walked slowly to her bed, then rested his big head gently on her lap. Emily smiled for real. "I missed you," she whispered. Kyle knelt beside the bed. His voice cracked. "You didn't just protect him, kiddo. You honored him. You honored all of us." Her mother wiped tears silently. Kyle took something from his pocket, a faded cloth patch. Rex's old military unit insignia. He pressed it into her hand. "He wore this during every mission. Now it's yours." Emily held it tight, eyes wide. Outside the room, a nurse's phone buzzed. She read the message aloud in shock. "K9 officers from 12 states want to come here. They're organizing a march for Emily." The hospital staff had seen all kinds of things over the years, but nothing like this. By the third day, the phones at Hope Ridge General were ringing non-stop. News anchors from New York and Los Angeles wanted interviews. K9 units from across the country were requesting permission to visit. Flowers piled outside Emily's room, and letters arrived by the hundreds. Handwritten notes from veterans, officers, children, even strangers. But it wasn't just sympathy that filled the air. It was something deeper. Respect that the video had ignited. Something across America that no one saw coming. A shaky, 2-minute clip of a tiny girl shielding a battered old war dog had struck the nation's heart like lightning. It wasn't just about a child being hurt. It was about why she got hurt, because she stood between evil and innocence. Because she refused to let a war hero be harmed. She took the blows for a warrior, one former Navy SEAL posted. That's what Marines do. That's what heroes do. The video hit 5 million views in 2 days. A retired Army colonel posted it with the caption, "This girl has more courage than half of Washington." One post showed a photo of Rex beside Emily's hospital bed. The caption read, "He once saved a platoon. She just saved him." People sent medals from their own service uniforms. A Vietnam veteran mailed his Purple Heart and wrote, "She deserves this more than I ever did." Kyle Braddock, overwhelmed, didn't know what to say. He'd fought in deserts, watched good men fall, and seen the world turn gray. But nothing had hit him like the sight of Emily lying broken on that hospital bed, asking only if Rex was okay. "I've never seen loyalty like that," he said to a news crew. Not in any war, not in any battle. Meanwhile, inside the hospital room, Emily recovered faster than doctors expected. Her spirit, they said, was unbreakable. She couldn't walk without help yet. Her ribs were still healing. But she kept asking the nurses to bring Rex inside. Every time he entered, the monitor slowed. Her breathing calmed. She smiled more. He would sit beside her bed, his massive head resting gently on her legs, and refuse to move. "I think he's guarding her now," a nurse whispered. Then came the message that changed everything. Kyle received a call from a police sergeant in Texas. "We're organizing a silent march. K9 handlers from all over. No signs, no speeches. Just us, our dogs, and our respect." At first, Kyle was speechless. "Why?" he finally asked. The man on the phone paused, then answered quietly, "Because what she did, what she stood for, it's what we try to teach every day. She didn't just protect Rex, she reminded us why we serve." Within hours, the march idea went viral. Departments from California, New Jersey, Florida, and even Alaska confirmed attendance. Military working dog units asked to join. Some handlers were willing to drive 2, even 3 days to get there. The plan was simple. 200 K9 units, one for each confirmed mission Rex had served during his military career, would march past the hospital in complete silence. No press. No banners. Just honor. Hope Ridge town officials approved it immediately. Local schools planned to dismiss early so students could attend. A group of firefighters offered to coordinate traffic. Restaurants pledged to feed every officer who arrived. The local VFW printed shirts. "She protected a protector." Inside her room, Emily listened in wide-eyed wonder as Kyle told her what was coming. "All those dogs? For me?" she asked softly. Kyle smiled. "For you. For Rex, for what you did." Emily gently reached for Rex's paw and held it. "And we better make sure he looks his best." The sun rose over Hope Ridge with a calm rarely felt in the small Arkansas's town. But the people could sense something different in the air. Something larger than the news headlines or the hospital updates. This was no longer just a local story. This was a national moment built not on politics, fame, or money, but on loyalty, pain, and pure courage. Down at City Hall, Mayor Denise Crawford reviewed final permits with a solemn expression. "We've hosted parades, festivals, even a presidential visit once," she told the town clerk. "But nothing like this. Nothing this sacred." They called it the March of 200. Departments had begun arriving by the dozens. By Monday morning, over 40 K9 units had already checked in at the fairgrounds. Local families opened their homes to the visiting officers. Motels were booked solid. Vets offered to care for any injured or retired dogs who traveled far. Kyle Braddock hadn't slept much. He spent every hour at the hospital with Emily, then returned home each night to prepare Rex. The dog, once tired and slow, now walked with surprising energy. He seemed to know something was happening. Something important. Kyle polished Rex's old collar, re-stitched the Velcro on his service vest, and carefully packed the folded American flag that had once draped over their units. Fallen soldier Rex's former handler, Staff Sergeant Mendez. Kyle still carried it out of respect. Now it would march with them again. At the hospital, Emily was cleared to be moved, but only to a wheelchair. Her ribs were still healing. Her face still bore the marks of the attack, but her eyes were bright, and her voice stronger. "Will there be 100 dogs?" she asked the nurse. The nurse smiled. "More than that. 200. Emily's eyes widened. "Will they all come just for Rex?" The nurse paused. "No, sweetheart. They're coming. For you." By Wednesday, the march route was finalized. From the edge of Main Street to the hospital's east entrance, exactly 1.3 miles. Enough space for 200 officers, each paired with their dogs. Each team representing a mission Rex had completed. There would be no music, no applause. Just the soft, steady rhythm of boots and paws. Local veterans set up chairs along the sidewalks. Children made handmade signs. "She stood for him," and "Real heroes are small and brave." Volunteers swept sidewalks and hung flags. A printing company donated banners with Emily's picture beside Rex, her hand on his head, his eyes calm beside her bandaged body. The caption read simply, "Protected by love." The morning of the march arrived like a prayer. It was overcast, just cool enough to need a jacket. Mist hung in the trees. Hope Ridge stood still, quiet, reverent. At the hospital, Emily was dressed carefully by her mother and a nurse. She wore a simple white dress, soft shoes, and Rex's unit patch pinned over her heart. "Ready?" Kyle asked gently, wheeling her to the window. She nodded. The first squad turned onto Main Street exactly at 3 p.m. The lead handler saluted. The dogs walked in disciplined silence. No barking, no distractions. Only purpose. Departments wore uniforms from their cities: Seattle, Tampa, Cleveland, Phoenix, Dallas. Some wore tactical gear. Others wore formal dress blues. But all of them had the same expression: respect. As they neared the hospital, the officers lined up on both sides of the driveway, shoulder to shoulder. Then the final team approached Kyle and Rex. Kyle wore his Marine dress uniform, medals polished, boots shined. Rex wore his vest and collar, his step strong, his gaze focused. At the hospital window, Emily sat wide-eyed, one hand pressed to the glass. When Rex saw her, he paused, then sat. One by one, all 200 K9 South followed, sitting in perfect silence, forming a guard of honor beneath her window. For a full minute, no one moved. No one spoke. Not even the wind dared interrupt. The town had stopped, not just for Emily, but for what she had done, for who she had become. The next morning, the town felt different. Hope Ridge, usually quiet, buzzed with something unspoken, something sacred. The streets still echoed the soft pads of paws and the steady boots of honor. Flags still fluttered from every home. Families who had never met Emily now spoke her name like a prayer. Children played with stuffed dogs, naming them Rex. Strangers wept just passing by the hospital, where it all happened. People weren't just proud, they were changed. The local paper's front page showed a still photo of the moment every K9 had. Sat beneath Emily's window 200 dogs, unmoving, eyes lifted, watching her. The headline read, A town salutes its bravest. Across the nation, the response exploded. Major networks replayed the footage of the march again and again. Celebrities shared tributes. A famous country singer released a song inspired by her. She stood between. NFL players wore patches with Rex's name on their cleats. A group of veterans rode cross-country just to lay a wreath near the hospital. And the donations poured in. By Friday morning, the family's GoFundMe had passed $800,000. People donated anything they could: $5, $20, even just prayers. In the comments, Emily's parents wept when they saw the numbers. Their hospital bills were gone. Her therapy, recovery, every need covered. But that wasn't what moved them most. It was the letters. Thousands of them. From school kids who had been bullied. From soldiers who missed their dogs. From parents who had lost sons in war, saying, "She reminds me of him." Kyle sat in Emily's hospital room, reading some aloud while Rex dozed at her feet. He carefully sorted the ones from veterans, the ones with dog tags inside, the ones with photos of fallen handlers. One woman sent a crumpled photo of her husband holding his canine before deployment. On the back it read, "Thank you for protecting what he once loved." Emily stared at it silently. Then said, "Can we put it on the wall?" They did, and soon the wall filled with photos, patches, and hand-drawn pictures. It became a tribute not just to her, but to every dog and handler who had ever served. Later that evening, Kyle returned with something in a velvet box. He knelt beside her bed. "This belonged to Rex," he said quietly. "He earned it in Kandahar. It's his Bronze Star." Emily looked up, wide-eyed. "You're giving it to me?" she whispered. Kyle nodded. "You earned it too." She held the medal in her tiny hands like it was made of gold. Outside the hospital, local businesses found their own ways to honor her. A bakery made cupcakes shaped like dog paws. A woodworker carved a bench for the city park with her name, and Rex's etched beneath the words, "Courage needs no size." The town council announced a new scholarship in her name for kids who stood up for others. They called it the Emily Shield Award. Meanwhile, the boys who attacked her were arrested, their actions impossible to hide now. The evidence was public, the video inescapable. Charges of aggravated assault and cruelty to animals followed. They were expelled from school. But when asked how she felt about them, Emily's answer stunned the world. "I forgive them," she said. "I just think maybe they were scared. Like Rex looked scary until I knew him." Her words rippled through social media. Forgiveness, spoken through bruised lips and bandaged ribs. Grace, offered by the girl who had every reason to hate. Town held a vigil that night. Candles lined the sidewalk from the hospital to Kyle's home. People walked in silence, many with their dogs, many in tears. Rex walked beside Emily's wheelchair, slow but proud. One veteran in uniform saluted her as she passed. "Ma'am," he said, "it was an honor to serve alongside you." She smiled, lifted the medal from her lap, and said, "It's not just mine. It's Rex's too." The White House press secretary stood behind the podium, straightened her notes, and looked directly into the sea of flashing cameras. "Yes," she said, "the president has seen the video. He was deeply moved by Emily Monroe's bravery, and we will be honoring her." That moment made it official. The little girl from Hope Ridge, Arkansas, the one who stood between a war dog and danger, was no longer just a symbol of small-town courage. She had become a national hero. Across every screen in America, her face appeared, bandaged, tired, but smiling beside her dog. Beside Rex. The official invitation came 2 days later. Emily was to be flown to Washington, D.C. as a guest of the president, where she would receive the Citizens Medal of Bravery, an award rarely given, especially to a child. It recognized extraordinary acts of courage and self-sacrifice that inspire a nation. Emily's parents, still trying to catch their breath, sat quietly as they read the letter. Kyle stood in the corner, holding Rex's leash, stunned. "She's going to be wearing a medal," he whispered, "just like every one of us who fought." The flight was arranged. Security coordinated with the Secret Service. Emily's doctor approved the travel, under the condition she had daily rest and Rex by her side. When they boarded the plane, dozens of passengers applauded. A flight attendant gave her a pair of pilot wings, whispering, "I've never seen someone so small do something so big." When they landed in Washington, a motorcade was waiting. On the ride to the hotel, Emily stared out the window, wide-eyed. She'd never left Arkansas before. The buildings were taller, the lights brighter, but she didn't look nervous. Rex had his head in her lap, calm as ever. That night, a Navy K-9 unit visited her hotel suite. They presented her with a custom-made patch, a silver shield with Rex's face in the center, and the words, "Guardians never back down." Emily hugged each handler and pinned the patch to her jacket. The next morning, at the White House, she walked slowly down the grand hallway, guided by her mother and Kyle. Rex, of course, walked beside her in his old service vest. Marines at every corner stood at attention. Secret Service agents nodded in quiet respect. In the East Room, reporters stood shoulder to shoulder. The president entered to applause, then knelt beside Emily. "Emily," he said gently, "what you did reminded us all why this country is still worth fighting for. You didn't do it for fame or for attention. You did it because your heart told you to protect someone who once protected us." He paused, then added, "And that makes you the bravest kind of American." He draped the medal around her neck, and she immediately leaned down and placed it on Rex's head. "He helped me be brave," she said into the microphone. "We did it together." That clip aired on every channel. That line, those 7 words, became part of the national conversation. Teachers repeated it in classrooms. Soldiers shared it from overseas. Children wrote it on posters. We did it together. After the ceremony, Emily visited the Pentagon. At the K-9 Memorial Wall, she placed flowers for every fallen military dog. Rex stood beside her like a soldier, silent and proud. Later, during a private tour of Arlington National Cemetery, she paused at a row of white stones, many marked only with initials and dates. She turned to Kyle. "Did Rex ever lose a friend?" "Here?" Kyle nodded slowly. "Yeah, he did." Emily didn't say a word. She took the medal from her neck, kissed it, and left it on one of the stones. Back in Hope Ridge, the town gathered around television sets to watch it all. Some wept, some stood in silence, and some, like the local sheriff, simply whispered, "That girl changed everything." The jet touched down in Arkansas, to cheers and banners stretched across the tarmac. Emily Monroe had gone to Washington, a brave little girl, and returned a national symbol of honor. Television crews stood behind barriers. Officers from multiple states formed an impromptu honor guard. Children held signs that read, "Welcome home, Hero Emily, and we love Rex too." As Kyle carried her down the stairs, the crowd burst into applause. Rex trotted beside him, wearing his full vest, his tail wagging proudly. A reporter whispered, "I've never seen a reception like this." But this wasn't just a homecoming. It was the start of something bigger. That week, 3 major news networks aired documentaries about Emily and Rex. One was titled, "The Girl Who Took the Hit." Another, "Shielded by Love." In interviews, Emily always redirected the spotlight. When asked what she felt during the attack, she simply answered, "I didn't want Rex to feel scared." What touched people most wasn't just her courage, it was her heart. She wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She was focused on making something good out of something awful. And she did. Within 2 weeks, Emily and her family launched a non-profit organization called Emily's Shield. Its mission: to pair retired military or police K-9 South with children recovering from trauma abuse, neglect, bullying, even grief. The idea spread like wildfire. Donations surged. Dog handlers from across the country volunteered. By the end of the month, the first 10 dog and child pairings had been made. One boy in Michigan, who hadn't spoken in 6 months after losing his father in combat, hugged a retired K-9 named Luna and whispered his first words since the funeral: "She smells like my dad's dog." Another girl in Oklahoma, who was severely bullied, was paired with an old police dog named Jax. She now slept peacefully with Jax curled beside her bed. Hope Ridge became the center of something extraordinary. Trainers and therapists arrived to help build a national facility. Local businesses sponsored kennels. High schools held fundraisers. Emily's story inspired action because it wasn't about tragedy. It was about how one moment of courage could ripple through the world. Kyle, watching it unfold, sometimes stood in the middle of it all, stunned. "It started with one girl," he often said. One girl who stood in the way and said, "No." He started calling her Captain. Emily would giggle every time. "I'm not in charge," she'd say. But everyone knew she was. One day, a quiet envelope arrived at Kyle's home. Inside was a folded American flag and a short note. "To Emily, you reminded me why I serve. Thank you for protecting one of our own. I hope this flag guards your heart like you guarded Rex." Chief Master Sergeant Daniel Cole, U.S. Air Force. Emily framed the note and hung the flag above her bed. Meanwhile, the town's mayor approved the building of a memorial statue, Emily and Rex, side by side, cast in bronze. The sculptor modeled it from a photograph taken the U.S. day of the Silent March, her arm around Rex's neck, his head bowed beside her. The base read, "True courage comes in small forms." At the statue's unveiling, Emily stood beside Kyle and her parents, holding Rex's leash. "I didn't do it to be brave," she told the crowd. "I just did what I thought was right. He would have protected me too." And that, more than anything, was what struck people. She never saw herself as a hero. She saw herself as a friend. Across the country, police academies began showing Emily's video during their K-9 training programs. Military bases shared it during briefings on loyalty and sacrifice. Her words were printed on posters in classrooms. "He would have protected me too." Years passed, but the story of Emily and Rex never faded. The town of Hope Ridge grew, but it never forgot. Tourists came year-round to visit the bronze statue of a little girl with her arm around a German shepherd, both standing firm, eyes forward. Teachers led field trips to the spot. Veterans left medals at its base. Kids traced the engraving on the pedestal and asked their parents, "Did this really happen?" And always, the answer was yes. Emily grew into a strong, calm teenager. She still wore Rex's patch on her backpack. Her scars had faded, but her mission had not. Emily's Shield, the organization she founded at 7, expanded into a national network. With over 150 therapy dogs trained and placed in homes, hospitals, and schools, the foundation had helped hundreds of children find peace through canine companionship. Some were trauma survivors. Some were children of fallen soldiers. All of them found hope through dogs who once served. Emily insisted on meeting every child who received a dog. "Each one deserves a beginning," she said. "Just like Rex gave me one." Rex, though older and slower, remained her shadow through everything. He followed her into classrooms when she gave talks on bravery. He lay beside her on stage at charity events. His graying face became the image of resilience printed on banners and book covers alike. When Emily turned 16, A publisher approached her with an idea to write a memoir. She hesitated at first. It wasn't just me, she said. But they convinced her, because the world needed to hear what courage looked like from someone who had lived it. Her book, titled Because I Stood, debuted as a bestseller. Critics called it Wise Beyond Her Years, and a book that will be read for generations. In one of the most quoted lines, Emily wrote, "I wasn't brave because I was strong. I was brave because I loved someone who couldn't protect himself in that moment." That's what loyalty means. And then, one spring morning, Rex didn't get up. He was 12. He had lived longer than most working canines south, with more love than most dogs could ever dream of. Emily lay beside him on the floor, stroking his ear as he took his final breath. "It's okay, buddy," she whispered. "You can rest now." The news of Rex's passing swept across the country like a tide. Police departments flew their canine flags at half-staff. Animal shelters held candlelight vigils. Thousands posted photos with their own dogs using the hashtag #RestEasyRex. Hope Ridge held a memorial in the town square. The statue was draped in a flag. Children placed dog toys and handwritten letters around its base. Kyle gave a eulogy. He choked up before he could finish it. Emily took the microphone and simply said, "He saved lives before I was even born. I just wanted to return the favor." She placed Rex's bronze star at the foot of the statue and stepped back, and in that moment, silence fell again, just like the day of the march. Years later, long after the news cameras left, after the headlines changed, people still came. Veterans brought service dogs to the memorial. Children whispered, "Thank you," through tears. And across the country, when someone showed courage in the face of fear, someone would say, "She pulled an Emily," or "He stood." Like Rex. Because some stories don't fade, they echo. In 2041, a military training facility was renamed the Emily Monroe K-9 Training Center, dedicated to pairing retiring war dogs with civilian children. A plaque at its entrance reads, "She was 7. He was a soldier." Together, they showed the world what it means to never back down. And somewhere in Hope Ridge, a little girl, now a young woman, still visits the statue of her best friend. Sometimes she brings flowers. Sometimes she just sits in silence. But always she remembers.